So before we get to the new congressman, let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
Schumer is not the man with a plan to fight Trump. He ain't the man with a plan for a good Cinco de Mayo. Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer need to be primaried and thrown out of office.
That is Charlemagne the God hosting The Daily Show. It's not too early to talk elections. We have the Dems recalibrating and the next generation of Republican leaders maneuvering to get that top spot in 2028. We'll have the Hill survey.
Number 2.
I call on my colleagues right now to demand the return of people unlawfully taken to El Salvador.
This guy has no reason to be in a jail in El Salvador. He's only there because of Trump's policies.
Yes, MS-13, when you're from El Salvador and you come here and you're part of a vicious gang, you might end up back in El Salvador in a prison. Success of the border has been unparalleled in American history, but turbulence has hindered Trump's attempt to rid our nation of alien criminals in our jails and troublemakers on our campuses. We'll examine.
Number 1.
We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries, but we have to take care of our people, and we're going to take care of our people first.
Yep, a monster trade tariff deal bill announced in the Rose Garden. It ripples through the country and around the world. We're going to talk about how it's going to affect everything, including the markets, which probably don't like it if the futures are indicative of what today will be like. Congressman, congratulations on the victory.
Thank you for having me. It was a big day.
So, yeah, of course, people looked at three things. They looked at the Gates seat, they looked at the Walz seat, and they looked at what happened in Wisconsin. Your thought, 14-point win is basically what the district is.
Yeah, look, that's the Cook PVI rating plus 14. I won by more than Ron DeSantis, or the same as what Ron DeSantis won by when he ran for Congress the first time there, and a little bit more than Mike Waltz. I'm not an incumbent, and it was a special election. So we were pretty excited about the results.
So I know the area well, but I want to talk to you, too, about what the president announced in the Rose Garden yesterday. How do you feel about it?
I agree with it. Look, tariffs are important for 3 reasons. Number 1, they allow us to change how we get our revenue. A tariff is basically a sales tax on foreign goods. Would you rather pay income taxes or a sales tax on foreign goods if you're keeping things the same? The second thing is we can't afford to have products come from countries that we might be at war with. We couldn't hold China accountable during COVID because we needed them for medicine and PPE. That's bad. And the third thing is we've got to make the floor fair so our companies can compete. So I think what he's doing is great.
So China got it the hardest, probably. If you take the 20% fentanyl, because they can't control fentanyl, they say they can't, but I think they could because the precursors for it are made there. And then you add in yesterday's tariffs, it's 54%. Now, China, for the most part, its economy is not nearly as strong. The consumers are not buying things. They have a surplus in so many goods, and the world markets are beginning to tighten up for them. This is not going to help.
No, and look, I think there's an easy solution. Countries can be fair to us, not charge us more for our goods than we charge for theirs. And then we got to bring home these key industries. Look, where toy action figures get made doesn't matter. But we can't afford as a country to have our prescription medications made in a country that we may be fighting with. That's just dangerous.
And how about Big Pharma and their use of Ireland? Ireland basically has zero tax, and Big Pharma pays basically zero tax. Between the discount on our corporate tax, which could go lower, and what's happening now with the tariffs coming in Ireland, could things change?
Yeah, well, look, I'm not a big fan of Ireland these days. I was the only...
They're way to the left.
Yeah, well, and I was the only Jewish Republican member of the Florida legislature, and the way that Ireland has gone all in on anti-Semitism and anti-Israel, it wouldn't mind me if we stick it to them.
Absolutely, and I understand it's embarrassing as somebody who's half Irish to think that they are focusing on what they call genocide in Gaza, and they are condemning Israel, and I think that Israel has pulled their ambassador, correct?
They have, yeah, and it's crazy. My family went to Ireland a couple years ago, one of the best family trips we ever had. I had no idea about the anti-Semitism. I think about what would the trip have been like if I'd been wearing a yarmulke while we were touring the country. Would it have been completely different? Just what you see out of Ireland, it's just shocking, and frankly, so many other countries, it's shocking. We can talk about that, but I don't mind if we stick it to Ireland a little bit.
All right, listen, I want you to hear Howard Lutnick, a guy right from New York City. He talked about the need for these tariffs and how they have to balance things out. Cut 12.
It was just soft politicians. I mean, as President Trump said, it was the people in the Oval Office. I mean, the European Union won't take chicken from America. They won't take lobsters from America. They hate our beef because our beef is beautiful and theirs is weak. It's unbelievable. We can't sell corn to India. We can't sell rice to Asia. Why in the world do we let these people sell their cars? 94% of cars in Japan are made in Japan. They just block us. Finally, the man behind the resolute desk, the man in the Oval Office, Donald Trump, is finally standing up for our farmers, our ranchers, and our manufacturers to let the world understand either they're buying our products or don't bother coming here unless you're paying for the right to come.
So your feeling about that, that's a practical look at the goods that we all take for granted. We don't know where they come from. And, I'm not really shopping in Italy these days. So your thoughts about this?
I think he nailed it. Look, we should not allow ourselves to be set up structurally at a disadvantage. The rules that they apply on us, we should apply on them. And frankly, if we do all that, maybe we end up with no tariffs for us or them. And I have news for you. If America has a fair playing field, we're going to win every time. That's why they put these tariffs on us, is because they know they can't compete with America.
So tell me how you came across President Trump and why he tapped you to run for this open seat.
Well, I was the second legislator in Florida to endorse President Trump when he was running against someone else from Florida who was running for president. And my endorsement was sort of big news because I was the only Jewish Republican in the Florida legislature, and I endorsed President Trump after 9/11. After October 7th. And what I realized on that day is the world, it wasn't just America that needed Donald Trump, it was the world. We needed to get safety and calmness back in the world. And the president appreciated that. So after I won the state Senate, I thought that's what I would be doing. A couple weeks after that, President Trump asked me to run when he tapped Mike Waltz. He actually endorsed me before I made the decision to run.
Do you have some friction with the governor?
I do. And look, he'll never forgive me for what I did. And I understand that.
For going with Trump?
Yeah, for going with Trump. I mean, it was a very, very big deal in Florida when I did what I did. But I did it because I liked what Governor DeSantis would say, but not so much what he would do. And with President Trump, you always knew you could count on him, and Israel had no better friend in his 4 years in the White House.
So when you look now at what's happening in these college campuses, Columbia came out and they started having an uprising for two anti-Israeli students who stormed into a classroom, an Israeli history class in Columbia, and they were suspended. And then there was demonstrations for the suspended kids. And that goes at Barnard, and that played out there. And next thing you know, Columbia has lost $400 million. They've recycled through 2 interim presidents. They still can't control their student body. And now they have 9 items that they got a punch card that they got to fulfill in order to have hope of getting that $400 million back. Harvard's also on the docket, Princeton too. How do you feel about this?
Well, it's hard for me. I went to one of those schools for college, and I spent my whole life hoping that my son would go to one of those schools, and now I don't know that I even want him to go to college. I mean, the problem is anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism is endemic. It is built into the DNA of these schools.
And there's not much of a difference. People should understand that.
No, but interestingly, you don't see it at these schools in the chemistry department or the physics department or the math department. Where you see it is in all these new fake areas of academia. It's usually something -studies, where basically all you can do with your degree is become a community organizer. And that is where you see this real anti-American, anti-Semitic hatred come. And they're using it. And the other problem is they're importing people from around the world to participate in these things. And that's why President Trump rounding them up, canceling their visas, and sending them home is the right thing to do.
Do you plan on getting on armed services or foreign affairs committees?
Well, when you come in the middle of a term and you're the guy at the bottom, you have to take the scraps that are available. And so I've told the team, put me where you need me. There's not a whole lot of committee spots left to give. I would very much like to be on foreign affairs because those issues are important to me as well. But I really want to see us fix the issues on our college campuses. What we're doing to Americans, what we're doing to our kids, is we're poisoning their minds. And it's a shame because that's the future. We've got to have our kids know the way the world works, know what makes America great, know what makes Israel great, know what makes our Western civilization great, because too many of them are being told it's bad, and it's just not okay.
And it's incredible because these foreign organizations and countries and terrorist organizations are pouring money in.
Yep.
So these people are being paid to protest. And I don't know where these professors are getting their paychecks from, because they seem to be firmly in the Hamas camp. Not even Palestinian camp, Hamas camp.
Well, that's, again, you have to look at the development of universities over the last 20 or 30 years. They started taking money from these foreign countries that don't like us. They endowed chairmanships. They picked professors. The percentage of students coming from these places has gone up. So they have changed the demographics of universities from being pro-American to bringing in people who don't like America. And then we see what these problems are. Look, what I would do, I would say most people are in college on student loans. I would say if these schools behave this way, you can't use their loans there. I chaired higher ed in Florida for 2 years. What I learned is you can have all the policies you want, but when you touch the budget, when you take the money away, they get in shape real fast. And I think that's what will happen.
It is pretty amazing. Harvard is desperate to get the president's attention to say, don't hold up our money anymore. Congressman Randy Fine, before we go, just on what the Israelis are doing now. The IDF has penetrated deep into Rafah, and now they've taken out a lot of their mid-range commanders. And now we're seeing the Palestinian people rise up and protest against Hamas. So I've been having trouble seeing the difference between Hamas and the Palestinian people, but the Palestinian people are seeing the difference. They had one of the protesters got murdered. The family came back and murdered the police officer. So they're in a very tenuous time over there. What do you make of it?
Well, I think that's good. Look, not everyone in Gaza is a terrorist or supports terrorists. Unfortunately, many, many do. And so that's the challenge. It's not a small number, and we've just got to be supporting the good people. Look, there are lots of Arabs who live in Israel and like living in Israel. They have full rights. They're citizens. They have very successful lives. In fact, Arabs have more rights in Israel than they have in most Muslim countries. And so what we need to create is a world where Arabs, Muslims, Christians, Jews that all want to live together can live together in peace in Israel, but the bad ones, they got to go.
Right. That would be great. While the Houthi rebels lob rockets and while the Iranians build nuclear weapons. It's a dangerous time in the world, but Congressman, you're going to be right in the middle of it. Congratulations on your victory. He's going to be representing the 6th District. There's no congressman-elect, right? You're in.
I got sworn in last night at 6 o'clock, less than 24 hours from the time the election ended to the time we got sworn in. I'm excited to do it.
How'd your family feel about it?
They are excited. We're all sort of surreal. I mean, I've slept about 10 hours in the last 3 nights. But look, President Trump needs warriors that will go and fight for them. The majority is so slim. And he asked me to do this because he saw in Florida that I was a guy that wasn't afraid of a fight, who'd pick up the sword, run up the hill, and chop the dragon's head off. And I'm ready to do it.
What is the margin now?
For the margin for me, I won by 14.
No, the margin.
Oh, it's 220. We're up to 220 to 213, I think. I think there's a couple of Democrats who passed away, unfortunately. So if they were to win, that'd be 215 to 220.
Okay, so you have 5. It's a little bit different than 2.
It sure is.
Things, Stefanik is back. You're in. The Gates seat is now back. So now you have a little bit of a margin. And now just go past earth-shaking budget resolutions. Great to see you, Congressman.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming in.
In the long run, we're all dead. Short run matters too. Nobody knows what the impact of these tariffs is going to be on the economy.
Anyone who says there may be a little bit of pain before we get things right need to talk about farmers who are one crop away from bankruptcy.
And that's the problem. There's very little, there's not much of a net. Taylor Riggs joins us now, co-host of The Big Money Show. A must listen or a much watch every day at 12. Taylor, your thoughts about how the market's reacting? It looks like we're down about 860 right now.
Yes. Okay, so markets always shoot first and ask questions later. So you wake up, all the algorithms see tariffs worse than expected, and everyone sell. Algorithms, yes. The markets are not the economy, but the markets can start to tell us how we're thinking about corporations who are publicly traded, who have said, we now have no earnings. Let's say, for example, and I'm making this up, Nike comes out and their quarterly earnings report and they say, we can't pass on prices to consumers. We're eating that cost. Therefore, we have no earnings, no profitability. That's what the market today is trying to figure out. Are companies profitable? Are they passing on costs to the consumers? I loved your bump and sod. Anyone who thinks they know the impact has no idea what the impact is going to be. We really have no idea. Most of the economic notes I read this morning are very much tilted to the negative side. But frankly, they were also tilted to the negative side back in 2018 when we did the limited tariffs on China as well. And they were wrong. So I'm trying to exhale, take a deep breath, and wait and see. The markets are not waiting and seeing. They're just looking forward to the next quarterly earnings report and getting through the next 3 months.
So with people with textiles, one person in the textile business, very successful, wrote me and says he'll need to spend $12 million more to bring his textile business back. And he says making clothing is hard.
Yes.
And that when they bring it back to the U.S., they're not good at it because we haven't done it. And I thought to myself, wow, isn't it just a machine? But it's not. Evidently, Vietnam and these other countries, especially in Southeast Asia, are good at it, and they come in at an affordable number. This blows up the whole metrics. Plus, it takes a while to bring back your stuff, right?
It does. I was reading one note that auto tariffs to even move 10% of the supply chain could be a 3-year process. So, and you know what? I hear small businesses like the textile manufacturer who wrote into you. My only response to that is the New Balance CEO tells that his shoes are made in the USA. They're not a publicly traded company. They're privately traded. Tesla, 87.5% of their parts are made in the USA. Tesla was able to do it in America, making things in America. Now, not perfect. There are some robotics, but he had to literally build a factory floor from hand. Yes, it took a long time. And that is the conundrum where I think we desperately now, more urgently than we did yesterday, need those tax cuts. We need to be able to do full expensing of factories, not just equipment, which is very different, which will allow that person who wrote into you to fully write off that expense. And so I think tax cuts are absolutely more urgent, and also 1,000% short-term pain for long-term gain. But again, what is that price that we want to pay for the long term?
Right. Howard Lutnick weighed in yesterday, cut 13.
They're going to want to negotiate. But these are the same people who have been ripping us off for all these years. Remember, the tariffs are only part of the issue. It's these non-tariff trade barriers where they just won't let you trade. They provide subsidies back, like they charge this VAT tax, right? And they always say, oh, it's not the VAT tax. You know what some of these countries do? They take that 20% tax and they give it back to their producers. So they crush our people. It's got to end, and what's going to happen is you're going to see the greatest renaissance of manufacturing in America.
So, I mean, he's cheerleading a little too, right?
Of course, right? He's the Commerce Secretary who's putting this plan together, and that is his job. My little frustration is the messaging. So we heard yesterday from Scott Bessent, who he said these tariffs are the ceiling, not the floor. It's negotiating. But Trump said in that press conference, like, these are permanent. This isn't negotiating. Like, this is it. Then you have Howard Lutnick saying countries are calling us to negotiate. Markets, business leaders, we need certainty. I need to know, do I have to build that factory in the USA? If I do, I will figure it out, make it work. But if this is a negotiating tool and you're going to take these off 3 months from now, I can't build a capital plan around that. So I think they need to work on the messaging so that I have certainty so I can plan.
Right. And it's only 3 of them. I mean, 3 of those economic guys are the ones talking, and they should be able to get on the same page. I like the idea of negotiating. Israel already came in. Vietnam came in. We hear India is trying to come in. You know, so let's start talking about it. Let's start negotiating. Trump does great at that.
Well, and the key is if this is a revenue.
He wants the revenue.
Well, and bingo.
Can't have it both.
So exactly. So in our perfect world for free market capitalism, tariffs are 0. Everyone let the best person win, right? With 0% tariffs on both sides. But if you're raising revenue, then that means my tariffs are not negotiable. That's where we're trying to read through the tea leaves and trying to figure out, is this a revenue raiser so we can reduce the income tax? Or are we trying to get to full ultimate fair trade?
And do you have an answer to that?
No, we've heard both from the administration. That's why markets and the economy, it's the uncertainty. I read one note today that said Liberation Day came and passed, but we don't have any more clarity. And I think that's maybe one of the issues that at least today the markets are digesting.
So China is looking to answer back. How do you think they're going to hit us back?
You know, I don't know. I mean, to Howard Lutnick's credit, I really respect that they've come out and they've explained to the American people how China manipulates via currency manipulation, they underwrite all of their companies because that's what they do. They're, a big socialist government, and they can just come in and give money to the companies the way that we in the private sector in American capitalism, we do not do. So there are certain things like non-tariff barriers, like currency manipulation. China stocks, though, were down today as well. It's not clear who needs who more. I mean, Howard Lutnick was very clear this morning when he said, we are the world's consumer. The U.S. consumes more than anyone else, trillions of dollars. China needs that.
They need consumers more than ever, right?
They do. Absolutely.
They say they're less equipped now to handle it than they were the first time.
Absolutely, because they've been in a massive period of economic stagflation and deflation, almost, if you will.
Consumers aren't spending over there.
They are not spending, and they're in sort of an economic conundrum over there. So, again, It is the game of chicken. Who needs who more?
Right. I needed you, and you were there for me, Taylor Riggs. Thanks so much. We'll watch you on FBN at noon.
Thank you.
Hey, when we come back, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna.
Breaking news, unique opinions. Hear it all on the Brian Kilmeade Show.
Hey, we are back. Thanks so much for listening. Our chance to keep up to date on all the breaking news. It's, market is down 1,400 points. That is a disaster so far. So we'll hold on tight and see what's going on with the tariffs, how people are responding, how the world markets are trying to recover. We just spoke to Taylor Riggs on what the approach of the administration is. But let's take a step back. And if you want to know why there was little activity on the House this week, is because there was a clash. There was a clash when Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna came out and said, hey, we need remote voting when it comes to women who serve and when it comes to after they give birth. They need a chat. We don't want to zone out. I get that, but we want to have remote voting. There's a huge problem with that because they worry about the ripple effect from there on in. The clash resulted in basically a shutdown of the House. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna joins us now from Florida's 13th District. Congresswoman, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on.
No problem. I want to get your perspective. Obviously, when someone gives birth, we're not expected back at work for, 3 months in the private sector, sometimes even longer? But in Congress, they have not really addressed this until you brought it up, correct?
Correct. They haven't addressed it. To put it in perspective, there's only ever been 13 women in U.S. history to ever give birth while serving. But specifically right now, we have a pregnant legislator who's a Republican. And that, as you know, we have the slimmest majority in U.S. history. So we have to address this. A lot of people saying, you should have to go. We are going back to work, and we still do, but we have a unique job to where one vote, ongoing discussion for over 2 years. But what happened this week specifically is, instead of allowing to keep the floor open and let us keep voting, which Speaker Johnson could have done, because there's something called a rule, and it's a parliamentary procedure, and it allows legislation to come to the floor. So it's not the actual bill; it's the legislation, basically hatch that you would actually press to allow it to come down, right? So what they did was they attached my petition to allow new moms to vote by proxy for a duration of time if they need it. And they attached it to the SAVE Act. And they weren't even planning on putting the SAVE Act on the floor, which is another separate conversation. And ultimately, as a result of that, failed. And so we're here today.
So the vote failed, but some Democrats were getting on board with it?
Well, so the push to allow new moms to vote is both Democrat and Republican. But the problem here is that, Johnson has largely been called out for this. He actually got community noted on X because he said that, it was our fault. It wasn't. They chose to send us home. We could have stayed to keep voting. So, I don't like the lies in politics, and Speaker Johnson's a nice guy, but he should have done that. It was wrong.
So why did they, I'm a little slow when it comes to parliamentary procedure. I apologize.
Yeah,
but why would they put it with the SAVE Act?
They wanted it to essentially be killed on the floor. So they were trying to force us to either kill this legislation to allow new moms to vote, or they were going to paint us as anti-election integrity, which the irony in all this is that myself and 8 other legislators, some of the most conservative in the House of Representatives, I think I have like a 93 or 94% freedom score, right? So very conservative, very pro-Trump. They try to paint us as anti-election integrity. And I think that in itself, when I was in internal discussions with the speaker, and three members specifically that are telling the speaker if he does not kill this, that they will shut down the entire House of Representatives. And it's people that do not believe in vote by proxy because they're saying that it's unconstitutional. However, those are the same people that also voted by proxy. So there's a lot going on right now. And frankly, the really upsetting thing is that we actually have legislation that we need to pass. And we do have a slim majority. We have several members expecting children, and they're not going to be able to vote. And we need their votes because we have the smallest majority in U.S. history. So, you know, I think there's a lot of ego involved here. But at the end of the day, you can't just change the rules because you don't like that you're losing. You shouldn't play with the agenda of the president either. And so I'm just putting the facts out there. And honestly, thank God for platforms like X that were able to community note the speaker, because they even said, you didn't have to send people home. Why did you do that? And so, you know, it's disingenuous to confuse the American people and try to paint us in a certain light. But this needs to be addressed, and I'm hoping that it will.
Here's what the speaker said right after this happened.
Well, it's a very disappointing result on the floor there. A handful of Republicans joined with all the Democrats to take down a rule. That's rarely done. It's very unfortunate in this case. 96% of House Republicans voted against proxy voting because they believe it's unconstitutional and they agree that it would open a Pandora's box. And so that's what we just saw. Let me just make this clear. That rule being brought down means that we can't have any further action on the floor this week. That means we will not be voting on the SAVE Act for election integrity. We will not be voting on the rogue judges who are attacking President Trump's agenda. We will not be taking down these terrible Biden policies with the CRA votes. All that was just wiped off the table. It's very unfortunate. We'll regroup and come back, and we'll have to do this again.
So you're saying that second half was insincere? They couldn't have stuck around?
Yeah, he basically, it's called a clean rule. So he could have done, you know, the legislation with that rule, and he chose to put it together. And even after the fact, they could have stayed. We could have stayed. We could have put it back on the floor, and they chose to send us home. In a backroom discussion that I had with the speaker and these holdout members, they said that they were going to exercise their legislative ability to try to kill this. And that's what they tried to do. As you're also hearing, though, he said that, you know, we're not going to go to vote on this legislation. I just want the American people to know that it wasn't until this came up with allowing new moms to vote that they were even willing to put the SAVE Act on the floor, which is a problem because we've had Congress for over 70 days. So, you know, there's a lot of nasty behavior that takes place in D.C., but I'm not going to be quiet about it. And as you saw, the speaker got fact-checked on that, and they said, no, this is a lie. And I'm glad that they did.
Okay, a couple of things. First off, have you contacted President Trump about this? I mean, you guys get along so well. I mean, how does he feel?
I don't like to disclose my personal conversations with the president, but what I will tell you is that his administration is one of the biggest pro-family administrations probably in U.S. history. And I would also say that this is not, you know, when we're talking about specifically vote by proxy or members of Congress from voting from home, no one's advocating for blanket allowances to do that, right? In fact, I am probably, case in point, I had a child. I never voted by proxy. A lot of these members vocally opposed to this have voted by proxy, which is the irony in all this. But again, we're talking about, you know, now with Cat Cam at 14 in U.S. history, it needs to be addressed because it will impact our ability to pass legislation in the next couple of months. And what's crazy about this entire conversation and argument is to try to paint someone like this. And as you stated, I have a wonderful relationship with President Trump, and he knows that. I have his cell phone number. But to paint us as anti-Trump, I mean, why would you want to do that? You know, like, this is just such a nasty thing to do. And so what I would say is I would very much so like them to put all this back on the floor. And if our vote fails, but don't attach the two to try to make a political point and play with the president's agenda. And I don't think, you know, the president would appreciate that either. So I will tell you that we have open lines of communication, but this is definitely, it's disingenuous for the speaker to do and to behave the way that he did. But that's exactly why I'm just going to continue putting the facts out there. I have nothing to hide. And so, I hope that this can get resolved.
It's amazing because, you know, Trump always solves problems harder than this. I mean, he's even, I'm about to go cover the Live tournament in Doral, and he's trying to get the PGA and Live together. This should be easier. So Congresswoman, a couple of things. This is what people worry about. And it's not without merit. So, okay, obviously, does anybody want a woman who gives birth back at work the next day? It doesn't happen. It's not 1850 or it's not Pioneer Woman. Everybody knows that. But now we have the advent of paternity. Okay, so you give birth. It's equal rights. Why is it okay for the woman to give birth and the man's got to go right back to work? His wife just had a baby, and then all of a sudden you have horrible things like Nancy Pelosi breaks a hip. She's stuck in the hospital in Lithuania. Why can't she vote for proxy? Doesn't that matter for senior citizens who break hips? You can see eye to eye with that. And then there's people who go through horrible things like cancer surgery. Jamie Raskin, he's got to go through all his treatment. Can he get remote voting? Isn't that horrible? Of course it's horrible to go through cancer treatment, but that's what they worry about. And do you see what they're saying?
Argument. The slippery slope argument is, I hear the what ifs and hypotheticals, but specifically to this, right? I'm talking specifically female members. And remember, the reason why it expanded to male members is because they wouldn't even allow the conversation for female members to be had. So I tried this back in January when we did our rules negotiations, which is the rules that are governing the House, and they wouldn't even allow that to come to the floor. They wouldn't allow it to even be a discussion. And so now you have 3 Republican members, I believe the number's 3, it's either 3 or 4, that are men that have babies on the way. And in the event of Wesley Hunt, he had to leave his son in the NICU to come up. It doesn't mean they have to use it, right? But the option, and then I said, well, Mr. Speaker, why don't you have the discretion to approve or disapprove? And then the answer to that was, no. But the problem here is that these arguments and the what ifs and the hypotheticals are being made by people that voted by proxy. And you can look this all up. And so that's why I'm saying is the argument there is no there, because these are the same people that when push came to shove, they did it, and their voting records are out there on it. So that's, I guess, the irony in all of this is that right now we have a slim majority, one of the slimmest majorities in U.S. history. Mm-hmm. These are legitimate concerns. It doesn't mean the member has to do it, but there needs to be a way for if, for example, Representative Kamik might need to be able to vote because she can't travel right back right away. There's good legislation that we have. Hopefully they put it on the floor. But these are all genuine concerns. And so I would say that, both sides, Republican and Democrat, abused the proxy voting during COVID-19, and they did it up until 2022. But I wasn't there at that time. But what I can tell you is that I'm addressing a very real concern, and that I've made my case, not just to Congress, but also to, now I think we're making it to the American people. And I think that, if they have the ability to put this on the floor, not attach it to anything, but do what they do with every other piece of legislation, it's going to pass overwhelmingly, and that's because other Republicans are going to vote for it as well. So there's a lot of internals, but I just wish that they weren't playing with the president's agenda like this.
And what's next then?
Well, so there's a lot of time between now and Monday. I've been in talks with the speaker and others, and so we'll see what they have to offer. But I would tell the speaker, and I've been telling the speaker, you should not have done what you did. It was not right. You shouldn't have sent us home. And I think now everyone knows that he has the ability to keep us there, so hopefully he won't do it again.
Okay, and you left the Freedom Caucus, right? You're so angry you left the Freedom Caucus?
Well, yeah, I left the Freedom Caucus because it was a few members in the Freedom Caucus that said that they were basically going to attach something to kill this allowing new moms to vote to the SAVE Act in an attempt to make me pick and choose and basically to try to launch a pressure campaign against me. And I actually wrote that in the letter to the Freedom Caucus. And I wrote it in a letter to the conference because that in itself is just nasty. Ironically enough, too, coming from people that didn't support the president. So that's kind of a plot twist.
Wow. Yeah, and lastly, just on something less important, the market at 15 lost 1,500 points. What's your reaction? What's your reaction?
I know in speaking previous to the president and also to my colleagues in Congress that initially everyone was anticipating maybe a slight jolt. But I do believe long term, because of what's happening, you'll see that it will allow for American business, more revenue for our country, and then also to impact the way that we're able to, shore up our coffers financially with the amount of product that we're getting from companies that are selling overseas. And so I think that it's going to be okay.
Have you
everyone forgets.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I said, remember. Yeah, everyone remembers what the economy was like under President Trump's first term. We're going to get back to there.
Lastly, when everyone wants to find out what's happening with the big, beautiful bill, have you seen what the Senate is working on?
I know the Senate and the House are both still kind of finessing the rest of that. But I do know for a fact in the big, beautiful bill, we are going to permanently resolve ending taxes on tips, ending tax on Social Security, ending tax on products that are made in America. But obviously also, too, those discussions typically happen between the Speaker of the House and then also the minority majority leader, and then their counterpart. And so typically what will happen is after those discussions happen, then we kind of see an overall input package. It'll kind of bring different factions of the conference in. So we're still working it on our end. But look, the goal is one big, beautiful bill.
All right. And just to seal this off, you're going to talk to the speaker again about reapproaching this?
I mean, yes, I've been in talks with him multiple times throughout this. But again, I would say that, what people are saying, I don't know if you remember the speaker's fight in January of 2020, or January of 2022, when we were negotiating the House rules, and everyone was like, I don't understand what's going on in Congress. There's a lot of parliamentary, what are rules? And so I think right now everyone's kind of understanding the process of how legislation works with the rule and the actual legislation. So, look, we have some great conservative members, but the process in all of this has to be respected. And the speaker has the ability to keep us there and has the ability to ensure that these are all brought to the floor separately and given a fair shot. And he should do that. But he should not lie about conservative members. He should not go out there and be disingenuous, because then he's going to get fact-checked, and that's embarrassing for him.
Go get him. Congresswoman, thanks so much for telling our audience your story. We got 15 stations. We got about 10 stations in Florida, so we heard it. Awesome. You're hearing throughout your district. Congresswoman, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, guys.
Batya Ungar-Sargon is all for this. She wrote a book about how the elites betrayed America's working class, and maybe it's a reorganization of that. Batya, welcome back. Your thoughts about what's happening. Not that much of a surprise, really.
I think that this is the first president in 60 years to say, I'm going to bet on the American working class and the American middle class. And what Wall Street is doing is effectively trying to short his agenda. They're trying to control him because they got used to being the only thing that mattered to American president after American president after American president. It was Wall Street and China.
Because they're tied us in with the pension plans and 401k. It wasn't Andrew Carnegie, right? It was all of us.
Exactly. And what Trump is doing is, it's honestly astonishing. He's saying, I am not here to service the international global elites who have been carried on the backs of the downwardly mobile, struggling, forgotten, humiliated American working class. I am here for the people. He's doing exactly what he promised to do. And the market sell-off, I don't know, Brian, this is like the most un-American, unpatriotic thing I think I have ever seen.
In what way?
The markets are effectively saying, if we can't get access to the cheap Chinese markets, if we can't keep selling out the American working class, we're out. I mean, that's what they're doing. It's disgusting. And it is unbelievably shocking that they have no shame about this. They are trying to control the president's agenda because for the first time in 60 years, he's picking average Americans over the elites.
So here's what Kevin Hassett says, his national economics advisor, cut 14.
I could tell you that the president's phone is ringing off the hook. But it doesn't mean that he's going to change because there's so much that they're doing with their value-added taxes and their non-tariff barriers that they're not like. Do you think the EU is going to change all their regulations that harm American workers? Not fast, for sure. And so I don't expect that there's going to be a massive reduction in this action. But everybody's talking to the president right now.
And we're seeing a retaliation, not retaliation. What China's going to do. What I'm encouraged about, because I look at China as an evil empire, I just do. And they said that they're less prepared now for a trade war with the U.S. than they were in 2018 when we first went at them and said this can't continue to exist. They're getting hit with 54% tariffs. So anything coming in here marked up 54%. Who's going to buy it? The question is, are you going to stop the online shopping where Amazon's got over 60% of all the items are Chinese?
Right. First of all, I love that guy. He always has a smile on his face.
Hassett,
yes. Yeah. I'm so angry, and he's just always doing the same thing, explaining things in a much calmer, kinder, gentler, with a big smile on his face. And I really aspire to be more like him. Right. You know what Trump did yesterday? He closed the de minimis loophole.
What does that mean?
The de minimis loophole was China could evade American tariffs on imports that were worth less than $800. This is the only reason Temu exists. It was simply a ploy by China. They would import things that were $2.50. You would look at the prices on these things and you're like, how is China making a profit on it? They're not. They used it to evade tariffs. So they would take a big shipping container and fill it with crap that was, 50 cents. And then, of course, within that would be the other things. And Trump simply said, we're not doing this anymore. We are not going to allow you to undercut the American worker. Brian, when you talk to industrialists for the last 5 years, 10 years, they will tell you de minimis was hurting American workers. How can we compete when China is importing things that are worth 50 cents? And that's where Americans are going to go to get them.
Well, yeah, we're going to see what's going to happen. So far, we see that France and the EU might, through the EU, France and Germany are getting pressure to do something back at us from, I guess, their lawmakers. And the EU is going to meet on April 7th, at which time they think they're going to slam into our tech center. China wants to try to punish our farmers. They envision farmers being Trump supporters, so they want to go after him that way. And then we'll see Israel came across and said, let's just do zero tariffs. And to me, the president should take, I want to see the president take that offer. Vietnam says, I hear you. We're going to drop our tariffs too, which is where a lot of our textiles are made. I think we should take that offer. But as I was talking to Taylor before, she was just saying, I think they want the revenue. I'm not sure that they want to cut the tariffs. They want the revenue from the tariffs to diminish what we're paying in income taxes.
Right. So this is a new thing for the president. The president has always, his whole life, has been a big proponent of tariffs as a way of making the product of the American worker competitive in the global marketplace again. This idea of using it to generate revenue, I think, is a more recent thing. I don't think the president cared much about the deficit in his first term. It was not something that, he got excited about the way that he does about restoring the American dream.
Now he's focused on it.
Now he's very focused on it. And so I think he does see it as a way to generate revenue. We're at the starting point, right? He's used these tariffs already unbelievably effectively in order to control the southern border, in order to get fentanyl down, right? In order to get these countries to the table who never would have come to the table otherwise. So it's already been unbelievably successful. We're at the beginning of a reorganization of the American economy. For the last 60 years, it's been an upward funnel of wealth from the backs of the American working class into the bank accounts of the global elites. And Trump has many ideas about how to reverse that. I want to point out something else I think is really important. He controlled the border, which limited the supply of cheap labor, and he imposed the tariffs, which raises the wages of the working class. But he is also radically cutting regulation. He's doing drill, baby, drill, and he has a tax cut coming. So there are things
everything at once
for the business community to look forward to. He just wants them to share a bit of that prosperity with the workers.
Right. And that's the thing. People say you're a rich country, but if you look at the wage increases over the last 20 years, they have not felt it, working class and middle class. You know what's so interesting is Scott Bessent, when I used to tell people, he was introduced to us as somebody who could be the next Treasury Secretary. And then the producers would say, not Allison and Pete. The producers say, who is that? That's not likely. He's going to go back. And I go, listen, that's how he's been introduced, and Trump people know him. Well, it turns out he was. The one thing he would say, and I looked at him, he comes off like an austere guy, but he's not from money. He says his dad lost everything at one point. He had to go to work at 16 years old, 15 years old. He's been working the rest of his life, and he comes off as somebody who's from Wall Street, and he says, I'm more worried. I go, what worries you? He says, what worries me is the amount of distribution of wealth. It's too high on those who are rich and not enough, and this guy's a billionaire, and not enough on the working class. He goes, that's how you have a civil war. Then people start having class resentment. I go, wow, that came out of left field. So that's his focus. He may look like a rich guy, and he is a rich guy, but his focus is not that way.
See, Brian, you just explained why I'm a MAGA lefty.
Yeah.
Because this is what my heart beats for. I look at our economy. In the 70s, the largest share of our GDP was in the middle class. That's what a healthy democracy looks like. Today, over 60% of the GDP is controlled by the top 10%. Not the 1% that Bernie loves to rail against, but the top 10%, the over-credentialed college elites who marry each other and have a combined income of $1 million. They are controlling over 60% of the GDP. And meanwhile, their cleaning lady and their nanny and their landscaper cannot afford a home. This is unacceptable.
I hear you. So that's what the focus is right now. We'll take a short time out and come back more with Batya because there's other things I want to talk about. Number one, there's so many great stories, so many interesting stories, one of which is not getting enough attention, what's happening in Gaza. The president also, by doing nothing, is doing a lot. He's letting Netanyahu do what he's supposed to do. And by not holding back, the message is getting to Hamas. Oh my goodness, there is no public sentiment on our side this time, because at the same time, he's pushing back on the colleges. Don't move.
He's so busy, he'll make your head spin. It's Brian Kilmeade.
Hey, we are back. So I don't know if you've noticed, there's so much going on. I don't blame you if you didn't. But about 2 weeks ago, Steve Witkoff walked away from Qatar and the talks when he felt as though Hamas lied to him. And they were disingenuous when they said they were going to let out, I think, between 3 and 5 hostages for a 60-day ceasefire. And the Israelis say, no, I want them all out. Enough of this. They were going back and forth. So Steve Witkoff walked away. So the Israelis are going in to do to Hamas what they did to Hezbollah. They're looking to take them apart. And unlike, there's no Joe Biden, there's no campus protests, there's no Macron visits, there's no pushback. Yeah, there's pushback inside Israel. That's fine. But they're letting them finish them off, because if Hamas stays in power, which they showed us they still are, this thing is going to be an endless cycle, just paused rather than ended. Batya Ungar-Sargon is with us now. And Batya, a couple of things. Now we see them holding on in Rafah. They're holding territory for the first time, not leaving. But we're seeing Palestinians protest against Hamas, right?
Yes.
In Gaza.
In Gaza, thousands of Palestinians have taken to the streets to protest against the brutality of Hamas. And it's horrifying, Brian, because all of the allegedly pro-Palestinian organizations, the international community, the campus protesters, they have nothing to say in support of these people who are being brutally suppressed by Hamas. They are killing them in the most brutal way. There was a young man, a 22-year-old. The footage of his body that was returned to his parents with a note clipped to it that said, "This is what happens when you criticize Hamas." His parents said that his body had been stabbed 175 times with a screwdriver. He had been burned all over his body. He had been tortured for hours and then murdered. And they killed another person after that. It's horrifying. It is absolutely horrifying. And you don't hear a peep out of any of the international community, any of the campus protesters. Nobody cares, because it turns out that they love terrorists more than they even hate Israel. And we all should be supporting these people, these brave people, for standing up against the brutality of Hamas, and really keeping our eye on this, because this is the potential for the next stage.
So yeah, the next stage. So what happened is Hamas, the family of that kid, young man, went and found the police officer, one of them involved, and they killed him on video. And the family stood up and says, we're not going to take it. And so they're pushing back. So this is the type of thing that we need to happen, because no one believes in the Palestinian Authority. But we're looking for some type of alternative. And the more people you let out of prison, the more Hamas members you're getting. So it's a tough situation where Netanyahu's got eyes going surging forward. But, and I can understand it, the hostage families are saying, hold on. And the former hostages are saying, hold on.
Yeah, I mean, since the beginning of this war, Israel has been caught in this horrifying Sophie's choice.
On purpose by Hamas.
Because they can either go easier on Hamas in the hopes of saving some of the hostages, or they could prioritize defeating Hamas, but then they put the hostages at risk. And of course, within Israeli society, they are naturally split over these two totally important, crucial, and uncompromisable imperatives. I want to say something about Qatar, though. These people, I mean, I don't understand what leverage they have over the United States. Why do we have an air base there and we get nothing in return for that? You know who would love an American air base? Israel, Saudi Arabia. People who have not been the spokespeople for Hamas from the beginning of this. Do you know that there are two people on Al Jazeera who are regular commentators who are actual members of the Qassam brigades? One of them was out there saying, yeah, we should be killing all of these protesters. And of course, Al Jazeera is totally state-sponsored by Qatar. Why do we not make any demands on them in exchange for this beautiful airbase? Hey, why don't you shut down your pro-terror propaganda network? It is the only news media that the majority of the Arab world consumes. How is that acceptable? And I have never heard an answer to this. Why is Steve Witkoff not out there making demands, not just on Hamas, but on Qatar? Joe Biden made them a major non-NATO ally in 2021. What did we get in exchange for that? I have no idea. No one can point to anything.
So they have pointed out that they are in a dangerous neighborhood with no army. So they said that they can't afford to take sides in all this. That's what they said.
It's total nonsense. You don't have to actually have a state-sponsored propaganda network for terrorists.
Al Jazeera.
Yes.
Right. Who is working there. And also UNRWA, the UN organization. So this is where we stand right now. But I did not know this. For 16 straight days, we've been hitting the Houthi rebels. Seriously hitting them. That's going to be big. And Iran said, we will, thinking about indirect talks with the U.S., but no direct talks. Problem is this window's open with their air defense damage, and so is their nuclear program damage before they get a nuclear weapon. What would you do?
It's a really good question. Tulsi Gabbard in her testimony said she does not think that they are close to being able to achieve a nuclear weapon. I think the American people want to see the evidence for that, what that is based on. We want to have an understanding. Look, Trump believes in peace through strength, and he believes that we should not be sending, young American men and women to fight wars that don't involve us. Marco Rubio made it very clear during his confirmation hearings, there are going to be 3 questions asked for every single decision in terms of foreign policy with this administration. Right. Does it make America stronger? Does it make America safer? And does it make America more prosperous? And I have seen only that guiding principle in every single decision that's been made.
True. Would you just say also a situation where if Israel says, I want to take this out, just like they took out those leaders inside Tehran, they still can't figure out how they did that after the president died accidentally in a helicopter draft. They had an inauguration for the new guy, and next thing you know, 2 Hamas leaders are dead. If Netanyahu tells Trump, I'm going to take it out, here's my coordinates, those 2,000-pound bombs you gave me, I'll use them. Would you help me knock the rockets out of the sky in return? What do you do there?
It's a very tough question, and one that's for the president who's much smarter than me. Israel is a very crucial ally in the Middle East, which enhances our national security and brings a lot to the table. That said, our interests and Israel's interests align a lot of the time, but not all of the time. We have our own separate interests as Americans, and so I would leave it to the president to decide if that was in our national security interest in that moment.
You want to ask me?
Yeah, what do you think, Brian?
Thanks for asking, Batya. It really came naturally. I'm saying go ahead and do it. We got your back. We have a 3rd aircraft carrier in the area. This has been an enemy to America for 40 years. They have assassination squads going into Staten Island trying to kill Iranians. They're trying to kill our ambassadors in Washington, D.C. They are the problem. Even though they're imperfect governments in the Middle East, they are the reason why we're having problems in there, and they are the ones stopping the Abraham Accords from going forward. They are fueling Hamas and Hezbollah. It seems like a huge planner's wart that needs to be destroyed. The Iranian people need to be unleashed. Okay?
Okay. Good answer.
Well, it's a very disappointing result on the floor there. A handful of Republicans joined with all the Democrats to take down a rule that's rarely done. It's very unfortunate in this case. 96% of House Republicans voted against proxy voting because they believe it's unconstitutional and they agree that it would open a Pandora's box. And so that's what we just saw. Let me just make this clear. That rule being brought down means that we can't have any further action on the floor this week. That means we will not be voting on the SAVE Act for election integrity. We will not be voting on the rogue judges who are attacking President Trump's agenda. We will not be taking down these terrible Biden policies with the CRA votes. All that was just wiped off the table. It's very unfortunate. We'll regroup and come back, and we'll have to do this again.
So that is Speaker Johnson talking about Congresswoman Luna, who wanted to put something on the floor saying that if you give birth as female, for we know only women can give birth, you should be able to do remote voting. And they didn't want to vote. Republicans wanted to kill it because they say Pandora's box because their theory is, what about hip surgery? What about cancer surgery? What about death in the family? What about, it's hard for me to get a plane at that hour.
Yeah.
So they worry about what it will lead to. As a woman who's given birth, Carley Shimkus,
wow.
How do you feel?
Okay, well, first of all, I've never been introduced like that before. But it's an honor.
It was written down there. Yes.
Right, okay,
but
cool.
it's true.
It should be my Chiron. It should be my lower third. As a woman who has given birth. I think that this was a big old mess within the Republican Party, and Paulina Luna and Speaker Johnson need to, sit in an office together and sort this one out, because what she was advocating for was 12 weeks surrounding the birth of your child to be able to remotely vote. And Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know enough about the inner workings of Congress to know if that's like a good thing or a bad thing, but I do know that it shouldn't have completely halted voting on two really important things. I mean, they were going to vote on voter ID.
Oh, I know.
And also these rogue judges, which I think way outweigh the 12 weeks surrounding the birth of a child.
She should have paced herself and went to another time.
I know.
Or worked it out.
I also don't think it looks good when lawmakers pull these moves where it's like, we need more this and that. We need more money. We need more time off. Maybe they do, but you did run for a position where you are working for the American people. So, it's one of those things that I don't think really made her look
Well, number
good.
one, you just know what's going to happen. So a woman gives birth and then the husband, well, excuse me, don't I get paternity? Aren't we an equal society? I need some time off. Okay. Sean Duffy's wife gave birth like 7 times when he was in Congress. He would have never worked.
Yeah.
Right? So, but there are people going to say, why in society?
Yeah.
Can men take off but not in Congress?
That's right. And Caroline Leavitt, and she gave birth and she was like on the campaign trail the next day.
Right.
Kayleigh McEnany as well.
Right.
These are incredible women.
But we haven't solved the problem, have we?
We have not. But
Right.
we'll continue talking about birthing people.
Thank you very much.
In the commercial break.
Whoever they are.